Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Final Trade. Here we are with the first set of lessons learned from the Baldur's Gate mass box opening. So these are just going to be a couple of things that I've thought about a lot since I opened all the boxes, sorted them, started selling cards, and just I've been seeing how that's been going. So I figure for the backdrop, we'll have a look at some Flappy Boys. And I got 21 of these out of the 17 boxes, and I have 10 left, which means I've sold 11 of them. And the interesting thing is, I've got, I think, 4 out of the 7 most expensive ones still left. So, still a lot of value left, and generally a lot of value left in all the cards that I have. But the first thing that really has surprised me about this is you won't sell many cards. And I guess this is one of those things I should have expected. I should have been able to predict this. But, we looked at distributions of cards within a box and within a set. And the reality is, the most valuable cards are most valuable because they are the most desired. And people want to buy them the most. And so most of what you sell is valuable stuff. And so you'll have fewer sales of cheap cards and you'll have more sales of expensive cards. But then the result of that is you start making back a pretty decent amount of your money, and you really haven't sold a large number of cards. You've sold a large value of cards. And so, to put it in perspective, 17 draft booster boxes of Baldur's Gate had 8,160 cards in them, and that does not count the tokens. And so far, I've sold a whopping 89 cards, but selling just barely over 1% of the cards, I've made back about 40% of my money. And so that kind of tells you how lopsided the distribution of what you really sell is. And I would have suspected, well, I probably ought to sell some proportion of cheap cards to expensive cards to, but it feels much more like you sell an inverted distribution. You sell a greater proportion of high dollar cards than medium price cards, and a greater proportion of medium price cards than cheap cards. The second thing, all of a sudden, you'll get a bunch of sales of one card. And at first, it kind of surprised me. And then I realized, oh, it's just a marketplace. And it must be that all of a sudden, I am the lowest price on that card. Because there would be times when I guess Battle Angels of Tyr was a good example of this. I had like 7 or 8 copies of that, and I hadn't sold any. And then all of a sudden, in like 36 hours, I sold 4 or 5 copies of it. So I raised the price of my remaining copies, and then I sold those. And now I just have like a foil borderless left, or maybe some other variant of it. But you'll start experiencing that a lot, where you sell few copies of a card or no copies of a card, but then all of a sudden you are the lowest price and you start selling a bunch of your copies of the card. Another insight I've had is I've become a lot more aware of how fees and postage and supplies impact the low value cards. And yeah, I mean, I've made videos in the past showing spreadsheets of this exact topic, of how when you're selling cheap cards, your postage eats up a greater percentage of your revenue. But it just makes you think about it a lot more when you look at taking a card you've sold for $3.50 and packaging it up, putting it in a penny sleeve, a top loader, a team bag, and an envelope. And after postage and supplies and market fees and fixed fees, you end up making about 55% of that $3.50. And so it puts it in a different perspective. And, you start to wonder things about how might you sell the cheap cards more efficiently? Should you even try? Or is it better to just go ahead and move them? Fees be damned, just move the cards, turn the inventory, and get the money back to reinvest in something else. And I think the answer to that question depends on who you are. Are you a small guy doing this as a hobby? Are you a medium guy who wants to one day be a big guy, and you're trying to turn inventory as fast as possible, as many times as possible, to build up and get to that point? So, I think the answer to that question is just a matter of what you would like this to be to you, just a part-time hobby that offsets a little bit of the cost of playing Magic, or its own business endeavor. But you certainly come to notice those fees a lot more than I thought I would. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about in this episode was the day before Dominaria United released. Basically, all the sales fell off a cliff. And of course, I'm just selling stuff from Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate is not even a standard set, but the Dominaria United release basically took the air out of the sales. And for several days over that weekend, I had like total of one sale. Where previously I was doing maybe 5 or 6 or 7 sales a day, something like that, just depending on the day. It totally fell off a cliff, and it has recovered into the weekend a week later, but it is still not what it was before. And I guess, that's another one of those things that makes sense in retrospect. We probably should have predicted that people's attention will go elsewhere. Their commander decks will get put down for a little while they focus on the new standard set that's come out and things in there they would like to have. Maybe people who play commander and standard, or people who just want to spend a bunch of time at their local card store the last couple weekends playing standard draft. So those are a few of the insights I've had. If you've done this before and you've had some other interesting insights, I'd really appreciate those, especially if it's insights that you don't get until you've done this multiple times. That's the really interesting thing from here is, what would I learn if I did this again? If I did it a third time? If I did this constantly, what are the kind of insights that you start to have, the things you learn, the things you didn't expect when you started? So let me know about those things. Any other questions you have, those always give me great inspiration for more videos. Otherwise, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Join me on Final Trade. Consider joining the Patreon. Thanks a lot, everyone.